Listen, listen. Sometimes when you're a streamer, everything goes to shit. There we go. Hey guys, good morning.
And welcome to Murdering Coffee, TPK Roleplay's GM talk show, where we will discuss all things TTRPGs and game mastering. I am Tyrant, and I'll be one of your co-hosts this morning. I'm joined by our second co-host, Sarah, as well as our very special guest, Chrissy. Today's topic is the psychology of game mastering. Our guest for this episode, Chrissy, is a licensed social worker who is working towards a PhD of social work and LISW and brings with her all of her experiences in using therapeutic TTRPGs with her clients. Good morning, Chrissy, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
It's so wonderful to have you.
It's
Like
amazing to have
such
you
an
back.
that's like such a little impressive blurb about me. I feel when you say it, I'm like, oh damn, how impressive that person is, and then I'm like, oh wait, that's me.
For all of you DMs, aspiring writers, and intrepid adventurers out there, we will be accepting audience questions throughout the stream. Uh, while you while you all think about some things you'd like to ask, why don't we go around the table really quick and introduce ourselves, starting with Sarah.
Hi, I'm Osaric Franco, and I play TTRPGs both here on TBK Roleplay and over at the incredible Nat 20 tabletop community. I play in a variety of systems right now, Dungeons and Dragons and Monster of the Week being the primary ones. I also GM the Bard's Refrain here on TBK Roleplay once a month, a homebrew campaign that's based on. I still need to work on my elevator pitch, but it's a musically inspired homebrew campaign. I think that's the best way to describe it. Chrissy?
Yeah. So hi guys, I'm Chrissy. Yeah, you can find me all over the place at ChrissyCrits. Like Tyrant so beautifully and eloquently put it. I am a licensed social worker. I have been playing various styles of tabletop role playing games and gaming in general since I was a kid. Um, I focus mainly on therapeutic gaming, so that's kind of like where my focus is at right now, how we can utilize gaming in a, you know, more therapeutic sense. Um, yeah, I have been doing all sorts of different things. You can find me all over, obviously, TPK, playing lots of different games in different styles. I'm a big, big fan of Tales from the Loop and Monsters of the Week and Kids on Bikes and Kids on Brooms and the whole nine yards, all the styles of games like that. I love D&D. D&D will always have my heart. But that's where I am right now because I like the idea of giving the characters all the autonomy ever, always, and all the authority. So, yeah.
Very good.
What else do you want to know? I'm not sure what else I should have said there.
Oh, we'll get into it. Don't worry.
All
And
right.
I am Tyrant, a GM staff member, player, and host for TPK Roleplay. I also do some streaming on my own channel, a little less now, a little more later. So come check that out if you want to see me and friends doing just the ultimate hijinks and getting into trouble. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Dr. Tyrant. I am not a doctor though. Yes. Now that we have the intros out of the way, how about we get this show on the road and get off of this horrible script? Hello! Welcome back,
Hi!
Chrissy. Oh my
Hi.
god. It's been 3 months since we've
I
had
know.
you on to talk
I
about
know.
this.
You
And
guys have
last
had
time,
some pretty impressive guests in those 3 months, though.
all
Including
of our
you.
Well,
all of our
yeah, I
all of
appreciate
our
that,
guests are
but
impressive. All of our guests are impressive, and
We only have impressive guests. That's like our one qualifier. When we sit down, we're like, who do we want? But are they impressive enough?
yes, yes. Will they shock and woo us as much as the audience? Um, Well, Sarah, last time we had Chrissy on, we didn't have you as the co-host
I
for that
know. I
episode.
was I
So
was I was on a little hiatus of sorts. So
yes,
I'm so excited to be here to
yes,
ask Chrissy all my questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a lot of fun, and we're gonna talk about some real cool shit. But first, before we dive into that, I just I have to bring up something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is coffee. Um, I could not live without coffee. I know there's some people in chat who probably agree with that, probably disagree with that. But coffee is the only thing that keeps me running. And who better to support, who better to talk about than our incredible first sponsor, of which we have an affiliation with, Found Familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Found Familiar is a TTRPG inspired coffee company who sells coffee products as well as TTRPG inspired merchandise.
We
If
have a
you
link
so,
below.
yes,
You should check it out because Streamlabs
you,
hates us and our commands aren't working. How dare.
oh wow, lots of, how dare Streamlabs, how dare,
How could you?
Oh, wait.
oh,
There it goes.
There
oh,
Cole
it
fixed
is.
it. Cole
yay.
Yay.
MVP.
So now we can say you can either look in chat to find the link to our Found Familiar site. Be sure to click on that link. Don't navigate by yourself because when you click on that link, it tells them that you came from us. But also, when you are done perusing and you have an awesome cart all kitted out, use discount code TPK. That's capital TPK, no spaces, at checkout for 10% off your entire order. So you can either check that out in chat. You can do !familiar to find that again, or you can scroll down to the bottom of our panels and click on the panel that has that in the sponsors. Found Familiar is an incredible company. I have had multiple of their coffee products so far, and I will be ordering from them for a very long time.
Yes,
Um,
Mhm.
but yes,
absolutely.
that is done, and we have fulfilled our corporate shilling obligation. Um, hello, Chrissy.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm delightful.
Yeah.
I'm zooted right now on caffeine, so thanks.
I know that's it. You get up, you wake up, and you're just like chug, 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 and then the rest of the show is just like ha energy. It's my favorite.
Um, Chrissy,
Yeah.
before we dive into today's topic, which is the psychology of game mastering, I have a few uh, pre questions for you.
Sure.
The first of which is if you wouldn't mind, especially for our audience who may not know you as a person, who may not have seen you last time we had you on, or seen you in other games and such here at TPK, could you please let them know what your qualifications are, why you got into therapeutic TTRPGs? Um, Let them know just a little bit about you.
Yeah. So, oh wow, what a loaded question.
Tell us your secrets, Chrissy.
Ooh. Yeah, so I have been, like I said, kind of like in my little intro, I suppose I've been playing various styles or games in general since I was a kid. And I think that gaming for me across the board kind of hit a place in my brain or in my heart, or however you want to put it, that allowed me to explore a whole bunch of different things that I wasn't able to do in my real life. I wanted to always be charismatic, and I wanted to be likable, and I wanted to be, very cool and hip, and I was just like a very nerdy kid who got to pretend to be cool and hip. Um, so that's how it started. When I was a little kid, I realized like, hey, this is like a really cool space that I can pretend and play and imagine my way into all sorts of different things. And then, life shows up, we get old, and
Ugh.
experiences happen. And I ended up in school, and I thought, well, I've always been drawn to helping. I was going to school to be a pharmacist first. That was like my dream, I thought. And when that didn't pan out because it just didn't feel good, it didn't feel right, and I had a whole bunch of life experience show up, I went back to go to school for social work. And when I did that, it was kind of like, oh, wait, this is an area where I can connect these two very important things to me. And those two things were playing, like imagination, connection, and helping people. So they just kind of like melded really beautifully. I went to school, got my degree. I got in touch with a bunch of people out there in the community who are doing similar things. So, I'm not the only person out there who is interested in this. There's different companies out there that are doing this. They're really wonderful. Um, and I got in touch with them, took some of their trainings, did some of their classes. Um, and then I started doing it on my own. So I started writing modules for games, running, quote unquote therapeutic games, because at the time they weren't therapeutic in the sense where they were a therapy game. They were just based on like very general therapeutic ideas. Um, I got to do, because of those games, I got to do a TED talk about all of it.
Which is
Um,
incredible. It's
yeah,
such a good TED Talk. I know we've got folks in the chat if we could get a link posted so folks could go check that out.
yeah.
It's good
So,
stuff.
yeah, so it just became like this very beautiful, like, meld of all of my favorite things. And then I thought, well, my experience with TPK has been really beautiful and wonderful, but I do think that to some degree there's like this lack of emotional and mental health support to like the streaming community as a whole. um, we hear a lot about streamers who commit suicide and do all of these things because it can be like a lot mentally and emotionally. So I thought, well, I might as well just pull all of these things into one and see how I can kind of make it work. And I think that so far it's going okay. I am going on to further education. I'm in school right now. Going to continue for my PhD. We were joking before the stream that I'm way less interested in the alphabet soup behind my name. Now I want the doctor in front of my name. Um, but yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. Um, it's my favorite.
Love
I could
it.
talk about it for hours. I just literally
Yes.
rambled, I think, for 4 straight
No,
minutes.
no, I loved it though, because I think it's a good place to establish, like, first of all, can I just say, like, the resonant, like, I can pretend to be the cool kid, and how that, like, oh my God, yes, I feel seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think across the board, um, fantasy, like whatever the fantasy involves, it doesn't have to be dragons and elves and long swords. Whatever the fantasy involves, um, it just gives you that chance to like be who you want to be, who you wish you could be, who you've always dreamed of being. And then you can take that hat off at the end of the day and like kind of just like set it on the shelf and be like, okay, I'll come back to that because what I just experienced was like really cool. Um, I wonder if I can be that cool in real life. So,
Yes. Yes. I love that. As the kid that was like constantly getting in trouble like in the back of the classroom cuz I was reading and not paying attention cuz I was like I just want to be cool like Sabriel. I get that. I
yeah,
feel that
yes,
deep in my
yes.
bones.
Yeah, and I think that like we lose that to some degree, right? And we're in little kid ages, it's cool to like everyone looks at little kids and they're like, oh, they're playing pretend, and that's what
Mhm.
kids do, and we should really play to the imagination. We should also do that in adulthood because the rules still apply. None of us know what we're doing in adulthood. We get here and we're like, oh, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah, no one
it's just
tells
like a
you.
big question mark. So you have these spaces where you can play pretend, you can try things, you can experience all these different sorts of things, and your brain reacts to that. Your brain's like, oh, I remember this. I remember imagination play. I remember when we used to do this. This is cool. Like, I want to keep doing this. I feel good doing this.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm a big fan.
That's really cool. And I feel like we're kind of venturing into our actual topic here, which is the psychology behind a lot of TTRPGs and game mastering. But before we get too far into that, I do want to, since this is technically a part two of a conversation that we're having here on Murder and Coffee, I want to give just a little bit of a recap of part one. Chrissy, if you had to describe um, therapeutic TTRPGs, how would you do that? What does a therapeutic TTRPG session look like in comparison to a normal one?
Yeah,
Normal.
so that was like a big focus on our last one. I remember that. So the difference, right, between therapeutic RPGs and RPGs that can be therapeutic or that you can feel are therapeutic is that therapeutic RPGs are ran by professionals. So that would be someone with a degree like me who has some knowledge in how to de-escalate and, deal with emotions and feelings and process. Um, so the therapeutic TTRPGs, like that, that is more focused on what goal the person wants to be dealing with. So all of my games that are therapeutic that I run as a social worker, as an LSW, they have goals. I've discussed them with the clients. The clients know that we'll be addressing them in the game, that some of it might be uncomfortable. We stop sometimes during the gameplay and we process through the feelings of like a client having an experience. Um, and it's a lot more focused on like a kind of, I don't want to call it a group therapy session, but it has that feel to it where it's like, okay, so we know we're playing a game and you guys can do whatever you want in the game, but if it gets to be too intense or whatever, we'll stop and we'll talk about it, and we'll process the emotions and we'll identify why. And usually there's a lot of really therapeutic conversation during those breaks. um, Whereas a normal game can do therapeutic things. You can resolve a lot, have a lot of really good emotions, have all of these heart moments, but it's not necessarily with a professional stopping the game and saying, okay, well, let's talk about this or let's process it. So that's the biggest difference. So, and then sometimes the content. I very intentionally place things into my games that challenge players. Um, you know, GMs on regular games don't necessarily always do that. They might unintentionally challenge their players emotionally, but they don't intend on it.
And we
And we,
do have that episode up on YouTube, which is now linked in the chat. So if folks want to learn more about, therapeutic gaming and all of that, go check out that video because it is incredible. But today we're going to kind of shift our focus a little bit to game mastering, which is something that I remember, Chrissy, this came up on the Discord a while ago, and I remember reading through some of the notes that you shared there and being like, oh shit, like as a GM, like I super duper don't want to be like stepping into this space and trying to like be something that I'm not. Like I am not a professional. I am not someone who needs to be therapizing my players.
Yeah.
So I just want to like quickly out of the gate, like, but I do think that GMs want to like have those emotional moments, right? Because I think we tie those to meaningful narratives. What advice would you have for GMs to like things to things to do or things to avoid to make sure that they're not, taking on something or attempting something without realizing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first, I just want to say, like, the human brain is going to automatically do things without really too much. We don't get too much say in what happens upstairs sometimes, right? Like, it just happens. So, as a GM, your players are going to have things happening without you. Um, Without you intending on them happening, right? And I think that a lot of the time I know we talked about this in that first episode as well, but making sure that there's like safe, healthy communication between a GM and the players. I think every guest so far on Murder and Coffee has talked about how important that is. And then the next thing I would say is like, don't therapize your friends.
Yes.
I mean, don't therapize your friends. So I offer a lot of services with TPK where I'm like, hey, if you guys need me, my DMs are always open. But it's never therapy. It's never like, hey, this is an intervention I think you should try. This is, it's always like, hey, let's talk about this. And if I can help you find some resources, I will. Hey, maybe, maybe there's a counseling center in your town, or maybe we can find a faith-based center in your town. So have some resources for your players. If you're playing an in-person game, get to know your local resources. Get to know, like, oh, we have a community mental health center out here, or here's 211. That's our local, like, kind of emergency line. Like, hey, if things get kind of wacky upstairs, here's 211. You can call them in a crisis. Have some resources available to your players, but also make sure, you're not saying to them, well, this is what I would do if I was in your situation. We don't want to broach into that area of therapy where
Right.
we're trying to talk through their problems with them and get them to a solution.
Mm-hmm.
That's on them. They can get to their own solutions. They're grown adults and they have that autonomy. We just want to give them maybe some resources and some things to help them get there, and then direct them to a professional. I'm the friend who will say, like, hey, here's your local mental health center, maybe contact them. I'm not the one.
Right. Well, I think
Yeah,
that's
but I'm
huge
not.
though. I think that's huge though, especially like I feel like in TTRPGs, that's where you get to explore, and you touched on it a little bit. That's where you play pretend and you imagine and you can go explore a lot of ideas. And sometimes we've talked a lot about like our consent form, or having a consent form when you're a GM to like let your players know what they're getting into. But I think sometimes like things can get wacky. So like having that kind of information on hand before, so you know where to send your friends and like the people that you're playing with, or if you're at your local game shop running a game or whatever, just having those in your back pocket is a great idea.
Yeah, and I always tell people, like, if you have questions, just deviate to a professional. Just deviate away, like, if because there's nothing wrong with that. And if somebody's reacting poorly to you deviating away, that's
Mhm.
less on you and more on them. Then they
Right.
really just need to go see their
Right.
professional. Like, there we
Right.
are back at square one. So
Mhm.
um as a
Mhm.
from a GM standpoint, it's always just kind of like, protect your players. If we want them to be the best players they can be and just really explore their narratives and be able to do these things very safely outside of the game, be a voice, be just like a, hey,
Mhm.
here's some resources for you, here's some spaces. My DMs are always open. I tell people that all the time. My DMs are always open. If anything's glaring though, like, I'll deviate away because I'm not right there. I can't, I'm not it.
Mhm. So to
But
that end, we do have a question. If there is, do you know if there's like a resource or directory to find like therapeutic gaming near folks in chat, so like they can get engaged in that?
yeah, so good question. So many good questions. So East Coast, West Coast. So we're gonna go with the two biggies. We have Game to Grow over on the West Coast. So if you're familiar with Game to Grow, it's, I believe gametogrow.org. I would touch base with them, maybe toss out a message to them, say, hey, I'm interested in this. Do you have any resources? They're based more, I think, in Seattle or Portland, somewhere in those like very fancy hipster towns, like out that direction.
Nice.
Um, but they are extremely connected to the community as a whole, and could probably direct people to some West Coast gaming groups or something similar to that. And then on the East Coast, we have, I believe Dr. Rachel Coward is out that way, and a handful of others. And there's in York, Pennsylvania, there is the Badhana group. Um, they do a lot of therapeutic gaming, and they also have like some conventions and things like that on the East Coast that, you know, and if you message any of those people, they will help you, because I know I've done it. Like, I've messaged all of them. And then there's also Geek Therapeutics. So that's where you can find people like me who are licensed geek therapists, or working on becoming licensed geek therapists, and we're listed in a directory. And a lot of them offer
That's
therapeutic
awesome.
gaming. And we also deal with any number of geeky things in therapy.
I love it.
So,
That's awesome. And
yeah.
really quick, we did have another question that I'd like to get to before we move on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, GPRKRN would want to know: are therapeutic games typically with one player, or are they in a group?
So wow, you guys are blowing my mind with these questions. So I have done individual RP games um, with clients individually, where I give them narrative descriptions and I give them different things to do character building, and then the character kind of they take their character in whatever direction they want to individually. There's also group games. I can run group games. It kind of just depends on what the client wants when they come see me and they're like, "Hey, I'm interested in this," or I offer it to them and I'm like, "Hey, or would this be something you're interested in?" Right now, I'm working with domestic violence, sexual assault, other crimes, human trafficking, things like that. Um, I can ask the clients, "Hey, do you want to work on some narrative therapies and like kind of change the narrative behind this like very traumatic incident?" And they'll say yes or no, and depending on what they say, I'm like, "Okay, we could do it individually or we could do it as a group. What would you like?" And depending on what they say is kind of where it goes, but it can be both. There's individual RPGs out there that you can write yourself, that you can do on your own. Off the top of my head, I have them in my office. I can't remember them, but they're out there.
This is excellent. And we'll make sure, I know we're kind of talking about it in the Discord, but when this switches over to YouTube, we'll make sure that we have as many of those resources linked in the YouTube description as possible so folks can kind of check those things out. So, uh,
Yeah.
time travel, hi YouTube, we got you.
Fantastic. So I'd like to start talking about the psychology behind all of this, and get down into some of the science. So Chrissy, the first question um, that I have, and that's always been interesting to me, and I think we've talked about it a little bit so far, is why, in your professional opinion, are people so drawn to TTRPGs?
So I think we have touched on this a little bit, but I really do. I think that our brains, to some degree, it kind of like craves if we don't participate in something for a while, or if we did something in childhood, right, and then we kind of like reform that or we re-explore it in adulthood. I think our brains get this like sense of nostalgia and love and like all of those good feelings come like rushing back, and we're like, "Ooh, let's do more of that." So and I think
Yep.
that's kind of like the good thing about it is that it kind of gives us those like good warm, good rushes of serotonin and like all of those good things where we're like, ooh, yes. um and I think people want more of that stuff. They want the feel goods. um and I think that's a big draw of it. I know that even if you didn't play TTRPGs as a kid, a lot of the imagination play that we did as children relates back to what we do in adult. Like, I've had those moments in games where I'm like, oh, so we're doing puzzles now. I'm bringing up
Mm-hmm.
puzzles because we were talking about like mysteries and puzzles and Candlekeep right before this. Like, oh, that's what we're doing now. I haven't done a riddle since I was a little kid. I don't do riddles very often. So like my brain gets like all like, oh man, how do I do this? Like my brain gets
Mm-hmm.
excited about it. And like there's lots of chemicals that just start popping off up there and they're like, ooh, this is it. Like
Yes.
even if I'm not enjoying it, because I don't,
Yes.
but
But at the same
um,
time, right? Like it's like I love that remembering because for me, like when I started playing TTRPGs and it was totally that like imagination, like I remember how to do this. And then the more I did it, it was like, oh hey Sarah, remember how you loved to like write? Okay, and like it's like a almost a domino effect. Is the more I did it, the more it was like, oh yeah, I remember this. Oh yeah, I remember this. And it was like, why do we as grown-ups decide that we don't get to have nice things? Like is a little bit what it feels like. And TTRPGs are the answer, right? Like you hang out with friends, you tell cool stories, you engage in like all of these hobbies, and it's like it tickles the brain in just like the best way.
yeah, yeah. And I think like brain wise, so I don't know. Have you guys ever seen the hand puppet for the brain? Is this like a thing that you guys have ever
I
seen?
no, but I'm so
Okay.
excited. I'm so
Okay.
excited for what you're about to tell me.
Okay, so like you can think of your brain like when you like look at your hand. This is like
Mhm.
a good way to like remember the parts of the brain. So like here is like the brain stem, or what we call
Mhm.
like the reptile brain, right?
Okay.
Like this is gonna control the eye movements, breathing, eating, all of the things we need to like survive is like here at the base. And then your thumb would be like the amygdala and the hippocampus. And these things are these are like the emotions. So these are like the limbic regions, the feel goods, the feels, the, ooh, I like this, I want more of it. And then when we close our hand over top of it, we get this front part would be like the cerebral cortex, and then we have like the middle prefrontal cortex and the cerebrum in the back. So like this is like a good brain. Like this is
This
like a
is
good
like
brain.
crazy. It's blowing my mind.
So this is where I get like super super nerdy. I'm not going to go super nerdy, and I'm probably chat. If I get any of these bits and pieces wrong, I apologize. But so when we're like just normal brain things, this is what our brain looks like, right? So like we're just doing everything we need to do. We're just like going about our day. We're doing whatever. But as soon as we start like exploring in TTRPGs, it's like our amygdala and our hippocampus are like, ooh,
Mm.
I like this, right? Like, I like this a lot. Like, this is a very good thing. I like this. I'm doing this more. And this starts to become more active, and it's pumping out more chemicals, and it's telling us, like, oh, keep doing this. It's probably, I would venture to say, why some of us are willing to sit for 8 hours playing one game, right?
Why would you what would cause you to say this?
No, you know.
This has never happened here. What are you talking about?
I would never. Except I absolutely would.
Yeah, and it's those feel good chemicals that our brains just kind of pumping out, and it's like, and then we have these bits in the front where these are going to be our decision makers, right? So like as we're like pumping out all these chemicals and we're like feeling good, we're doing all the things, like now we're activating the fronts of our brains. Now we're like, ooh, we have a puzzle. Ooh, we have to get over this. We have to do this task. Ooh, we have to do all this stuff. So now our almost all of our brain is activated, right? So we're looking at, just basic functioning, and then the emotions, and then the reactions, um, and how to like decision make. And then we like scoot back here, and it's like, okay, so now I'm going to be doing like eye hand coordination. I have to think about how far I can travel, what I can do, what would my player do, what's my strength. Like there are all these different things that happen all over the brain, and we wonder why we can sit for 8, or I think somebody in chat said 9 hours, 10 hours, whatever, um, and have these great experiences. And even if the game is bad, right? Like if we have a bad table experience, we still have activated all these different parts of the brain. Um, and then we catch ourselves thinking about it more afterwards. What if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? I wonder what would have happened if my character would have done this instead. And then it becomes reflective. Um, and it's just super helpful. I mean, I just can't listen out.
No,
And
no,
I'm
I
zooted.
love it. I love it though, because I think I'll go there. I think sometimes TTRPGs are kind of, or like nerd stuff in general, are like a little bit frowned upon. Not
Mhm.
frowned, but kind of like, oh, like I know I'm gonna be rude right now. I know when I'm like talking to like my normie friends, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm playing TTRPGs, I'm doing this stuff. They just kind of like blank stare, like I don't know what that means. And what I love about this is it's first of all, number one, validating. But number two, I think it's something that's like helpful to understand when like explaining to other folks, like, no, like I'm engaging with something that's like just satisfying in all of the brain ways, because it is a difficult thing to describe to like, other people. Because on the surface, your girl's sitting at her kitchen table eating chips and salsa for 8-9 hours, rolling click clack rocks and being like, I'm a wizard. And that does seem a little unhinged.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean,
Go for it.
Yeah, well, I think you just touched on a lot of really important things. Is stigma, right, across the board, and I think that's something that GMs can work actively to break and break down. But yeah, like there's this strange stigma, and I know that with D&D specifically, there was the whole like satanic panic and oh man, magic, oh whoa, and I know, you know, I'm gonna say Harry Potter, even though I'm not a but like, you know, even Harry Potter had some of that kickback of like, hey, we don't want people exploring this part of their brain. Well, why not,
No
right?
spells.
Like,
No spells.
yeah, why not? And it is weird to explain. Like, it's hard to sit down and tell people like, oh, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, oh, I'm a social worker with like a focus in therapeutic gaming. And they're like, gaming, like Monopoly? And I'm like, sure, yes, we could include Monopoly for financial exploration.
Right.
Yeah.
You want to let's build up capitalism. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, sure. But this is more like fantasy based, and they're like, oh, and it's like a very like
Yes.
uncomfortable, and I'm like, ooh, yeah,
Oh, I
okay, you don't
hate
get
it.
But then when you put somebody who's never played a game into a game, right? It's like, oh, this is what you do. This is totally different. Um, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting dynamic. And I think until people experience it, they don't get it. And then suddenly we have all these brand new players that like absolutely love it. Isn't that funny? You know,
Isn't it
because they want that
strange?
feel good. They want that like continue. Oh, I feel good. I can do whatever I want. You're telling me I could blow up this town? Sure.
You can. You can. But what I love about that though is like I think and we can navigate back to the GMing side of things a little bit, right? Because it is fantasy fulfillment, like yes, you can blow up that town. And now we are exploring the consequences.
Of such.
Right.
Yeah.
And like as a GM, I know like that can be a difficult thing to balance. Like you know, yeah, so you just blew up an entire town and you are now going to be lawful evil because you super duper chaotic evil. Your alignment's different now. Like you've made that choice. But like I think it goes to something that we've got kind of lined up to talk about, and that's problem moments in games where you know players have gone off the fucking rails, or we have players contentions between their choice. I want to blow up the village, well I want to save it, like, and as a GM, as just like a normal person in that environment, what advice do you have for like dealing with those disputes or emotional distress like in game?
Yeah, I mean, first, Ty, did you have something to say? I feel like both Sarah and I cut you off like mid sentence. Did I do that?
No. Listen. I have questions, but I'm keeping track of them.
Okay, great.
But I'm never going to be like, no, it's my turn.
Okay, all right. Just checking, because I was like, I feel like Ty was like in the middle of saying something, and then I was like, oh, but just never but.
Absolutely. We do have one thing really quick. Speaking of consequences, yes, you're probably going to have consequences unless you are a kobold in a daycare.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. True.
Fair.
Yeah.
True. It's true. That is very true. Yeah, so how dealing with like those points of contention and some of those stressors, and like so our term, like clinical terms for people who aren't like degreed, right, is lay, like lay people.
Layman.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, but yeah, lay people. I'm not a fan of it, but it's just the easiest way to put it. So like, if you're a lay person, if you're a person who has no training whatsoever in therapeutic gaming, if you're just a normal run of the mill, throw some click clack rocks down on the table kind of person, and things start to get crazy at your table, stop. Just stop.
I love that.
I think that goes for streamers as well. Like, you know, I think we've all had that experience where like, oh, things are getting kind of wacky, and then the DM starts to kind of panic a little bit. Just stop, because like, if you remove the antagonist fully, which is the game, then we've removed it, and then we can focus on solution. Continuing to try to get the players to some degree, if you're not experienced in conflict resolution or you don't know what that looks like, trying to get the players to figure it out sometimes in game can create huge rifts. I think everybody who's played TTRPGs can say that they've had one game where they were like, it ended bad. And it was usually because either the DM didn't stepped in far too much, or the players were unwilling to get out of the game and focus on solution, right? Like, it's hard. It's like a very hard thing to address. And if you're not trained in addressing it, it can be even more difficult because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. You don't want to do all of these things. But sometimes you just remove the antagonist fully. And I think Luca was like, oh shit, the antagonist is the game. Yeah.
Yes.
Because we're like challenging everybody. Everybody in the game is challenged. The DM is being challenged. The players are being challenged. That's the antagonist. You might have a big bad evil guy, but the antagonist is the game, and it's challenging a lot of things and a lot of people. So if we just remove it, boop, the end.
Yeah, I know. I love that.
I really love. Oh my god, Last HP. Oh my god, I almost called him. Listen, I'm bad with names, and I almost called him Saint again, and I knew that wasn't it. And fuck. I do really love Last HP's like red card pulling. Like if something's happening in the game, red card it, pull it. We're deviating, we're switching, we're flipping script. No more, we're not doing that. I think that's really cool for lay people to like have that in a game. Have a code word.
Right.
Whatever.
Absolutely.
Whatever it needs to be.
You identifying the game as the antagonist, because I think a lot of times the thing that like stresses, I know as a GM, like I've run those sessions and it's been bad, and it's like that guy, like that guy fucked up my story, like that guy like came at me and ruined my day, and then I have like antagonistic feelings towards that person, and my brain's a little broken as well because elevating it to like, no, the game was the problem, not the person, like completely shifts the narrative and helps you focus on the solutions. I think that's phenomenal. I love that.
Yeah, because I think that to some degree, as GMs, I know for myself, like if I'll use my Tales from the Loop game as an example. So I run these off-screen games where we just record them and then post them on Patreon, and then they end up on YouTube for TPK. We ran Tales from the Loop, and it's a very yes and game where the players have full control over what's happening. And I have a very rough idea of the story that I want to tell, but the characters control it, and the characters control what they do. And there were, in the first 10 minutes of the game, nothing went according to plan. Not a single, they didn't do a single thing that I was hoping or needing them to do to further my narrative.
Right. Yes.
So I was like,
don't you know? I worked so hard. It's my story.
I was like, well, looks like we're not doing that today. Like, you know what I mean? So I think for GM, sometimes that can be kind of like I'm going to say it, like kind of like an ego hit. We spend all this time prepping, we get prepared, we set up all these NPCs and all these villages, you know what I mean? And then the players come in and they're like, I'm fireballing the cathedral. I think somebody said it in chat. And I'm like, cool.
Or like,
the thing you need is in the cathedral.
Or like, I'm leaving the tavern. I'm literally not engaging with any of the hooks you've set up. I am leaving the tavern. And it's like,
out.
Cool. Right. Sick. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have to be the ones that, as GMs, be mindful of the fact that like there's any number of reasons why our characters do that, and our players, you know. I have had players divulge to me in non-therapeutic games after the fact, like, hey, that NPC that you had, I did not like them, and I was not going to try to save them. And I was like, well, you didn't like them, or the character didn't like them? And it was like, no, I didn't like them. Me. Like, I didn't like the way they were talking or behaving, and they were rude, and I was like not feeling that NPC at all, and I was not going to help them. And I was like, okay, interesting, you know. You really never know what a player is processing as you're unfolding this world, and how they engage with it is like, it can get weird. So sometimes you just have to remove the antagonist fully. Like, okay, so you guys are getting real amped up about this. You're feeling some type of way. There's some back and forth between players that feels kind of aggressive. How about we just like call it for the night? We discuss it maybe in like a group chat a little bit about why and how, and then we reschedule again. Because the narrative's not going anywhere. The game's not going anywhere. I'll play it
Yes.
until the end of days. We don't have to have a solution right now. And
Yes.
see where that goes.
And one thing I do want to bring up, because I think we've been talking about how the game is the antagonist, and one thing that comes to mind when I think about that is something from our last episode of Murder and Coffee that DMF Saint brought up, or and that we talked about, is that a GM uh, should their philosophy should be based around, or well, Saint's philosophy is based around being the player's biggest fan.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever he runs games, um, especially, and you can see it very clearly in his Monster of the Week campaign Roundhouse, which is shared between this channel TPK and his own channel Nat 20. You get a shout out for Nat 20 in chat. Uh, but he, and it may be the system Monster of the Week, but I feel like he does this in pretty much all of his games too. He really lets the players have as much agency as the system allows, and especially with Monster of the Week, that is a lot,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of agency. And so whenever he is GMing, the game quite literally becomes the antagonist, because he is saying yes, 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 and yes, but blah blah blah. He's exercising all of these improv techniques, which is the topic of our last episode. Um, and then when we fail a roll, that's the only time something quote unquote bad happens. And I think that's really cool, especially in terms of how we are able to world build as players. And then the only time, the GM has to, I don't want to use the word punish because that's not the right word, but enact consequences for, a failed roll is, well, with a failed roll. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that really exercises that concept of the game being the antagonist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved your distinction of like punishing players. I don't think that that's the GM's like you shouldn't be in the mindset of like punishing your players. Because again, I think that that's like a me versus you versus kind of narrative, which is very easy to kind of slip into, right? Because there is like what Chrissy said. I worked really hard to like write this thing and I'm like doing my best and you're just totally like kicking me in the gut right now. Like I want to like get back at you like but it really is like you shouldn't want to like punish your players. You can enact consequences, but it shouldn't be from a place of like I'm getting back at you. And as like a
Mm-hmm.
human person, that's really difficult sometimes.
Well, and I think players pick up on that sort of stuff, right? Like,
Mhm.
I know that I have done things in games when and I've probably done them recently in games where like I've enacted consequences or I have done something because I'm like, you little shitheads, you did the thing that I didn't need you to do. So now I'm gonna make you pay for it. Like, you know what I mean? I'm sure I've done that recently, but ultimately, I think what it comes down to is like across the board. And I love Saint's idea of like being somebody, like being your player's biggest fans. I love the idea um, of just supportive. I'm a huge, you guys know me, like I am like everybody rules, you guys are cool, like I'm like a huge fan of just being emotionally supportive across the board. But when you're exploring things in TTRPGs and then you face consequences that through no fault of your own, because me as the GM is salty because my narrative wasn't explored, um, that just turns me off to wanting to do it. So we go back to this like brain idea where like we have all of these emotions. Well, now I'm no longer pumping out those good feels and I'm pumping out those bad feels to just the same degree. And it's like, okay, well now I'm relating this experience of being a player in a shitty way. And now I'm not enjoying myself, and now the DM is doing all of these things to make my life miserable, in your head, and
Punishing
then
me.
punishing me, and now I'm gonna react in a way that tells me like, hey, I'm not gonna do this anymore. I'm gonna shut down. I'm gonna walk away. I'm not coming back to this game. I'm not gonna play again. It can be just as bad as it can be good, I think, to some degree.
Right, which I think is why, like, and we've talked about this so much on this show, but we'll keep talking about it on this show, why respect, communication, like, these are, like, essential parts of TTRPGs, right? And especially as a GM, if you set that tone of, we are going to talk about the things, we are going to, like, have an open channel of communication, and we're going to approach this respectfully, assume positive intent, like, those kinds of things, level setting in a session 0 so folks know what they're stepping into to help avoid those situations where it's like, like if you're running a hardcore campaign where like you need to communicate that, right? So players don't kind of fall into that mindset of like, you're just trying to make me miserable. It's like, no, like this is what I was set out to do, and clear expectations, right?
Yeah, so I'll use Tomb of Annihilation as an example, right? So I fucking love that campaign because it is intense. Even Tyranny, even our Queen's Gambit campaign, we had discussions like it is intentionally a moving game where like you are moving through things, you are in places that are going to challenge you, you are going to have to do things that you are not used to doing, you are going to have to like participate fully, and there are going to be consequences to your actions, whatever that looks like whatever that looks like. And but in no way, shape, or form have either of the DMs in those games been like, hey, if something's like too much, just let me know, right? Like there's open communication constantly of like, oh, hey, you guys did this thing, here are your consequences. You have to deal with the consequences. And then it's on us, it's not on the DM. And I think that's important too, is remembering like players very much have, the autonomy to make these choices.
Right, but there's a
And it's,
responsibility that goes with that, right?
yeah, especially in games that going into it with that communication of like, oh, this is going to be a game where like, in TOA we're in the fucking forest, fucking whatever, like you want to call it,
There's
in
zombie
real world.
Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's wrecking. There's a lot happening there. It's
yeah, like
dangerous.
in whatever real world terms, it's like this very intense environment, and it's like, okay, so either you do the things or you don't, but either way, consequences. The same thing with Queen's Gambit. We went into it, and Magic was like, we're jumping off. Game 1 is going to be intense, and we were all like, okay, like question mark. And then as soon as we got into it, I think all the players were like, what is happening? But it was us. It wasn't the DM. Like it, because we full well knew, and I knew going into TOA that's what it was going to be because I've watched it, right? Like I've seen how the games go. Like I'm aware of what's happening. And I think that goes to the DM and the players of having that communication, exploring what they're going to be playing, right? So like I'm not a fan of I mean I do like spoilers. Let me fix that. I do love spoilers because I hate surprises. But I did some research. Like I just Googled around like, hey, what is like Queen, like what is this? Like what is Tyranny? And it was like, oh, it's based in like you're gonna fight Tiamat or whatever and I was like, oh shit, okay, so this is kind of serious. Like it's not like,
This is not a hijinksy like.
yeah. We're not gonna be like, ooh, cool. And
Turk
TOA same.
screams in Winterhold's finest. Political intrigue.
Yeah, you guys did a number on that game. Listen, it's one of my favorites though.
Listen, don't give a bunch of GMs one-shot opportunities because they're gonna meme the shit out of it. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it does come down to that communication, exploring what you're playing, making sure that you're very open with your players about what you're going to be playing, what the expectation is, and I don't mean expectation of like, oh, I expect your characters to do this, but like, oh, hey, the expectation
Here's
is
the
that
tone.
we're gonna
Here's
move quickly. Yep,
right. Here's what we're
yep,
after. Like, this is what you can expect from me as a GM, and this is what you can expect from the narrative.
yes. Because that in and of itself, having those conversations and knowing that beforehand, it just goes back to like this whole brain thing where like, you know, if I know what is going to be happening, then the emotions that I'm going to pump out of my brain are going to be like, oh, okay, so like I know what to expect. I
Yes.
might react a little bit differently, right? Like my reactions
Mm-hmm.
might be a little bit different, but I at least knew going into it, and I'm not thrown off and surprised, which I think happens a lot in home games when there isn't that communication, where when things start to go kind of wacky or intense or crazy or whatever word, well, then suddenly your brain's like, oh, what is happening? No, I don't like it.
Right.
And then we want to run from the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it goes back to like I know Ty's already talked about Saint. I joined his Morningstar campaign and he was very upfront with me when I joined. And it was funny because he was like, listen, here's where we're at with this game. Here's where the party you're joining is. And like you are not going to want to bring, and he like called out one of my other characters. He was like, if you bring that kind of character to this game, you're going to have a bad time. Like
Mm,
I still had the creative freedom. I still could do whatever I wanted, but there was that immediate like, this is where we're at. This is what's going to happen. And here's what you can do to like succeed in this environment. But the choice is up to you. Like,
yes.
and I think that that's exact, like as a GM, your responsibility is to facilitate that communication, right? And those
Yes.
kinds of
Yep.
things. If you can set like this is where we're at, this is what we're going to do and be open about that, it's going to make all the interactions better. It's going to be easier for your players to assume positive intent because you've already given them the heads up, right?
Right. Yes.
Mhm.
Yep. And they can sit down at the table with the expectation of like, okay, so crazy things might happen in this game. I might not agree with the person across the table from me or on stream with me and what they're doing, but I know that this is kind of like the intent um, of the game. The game is kind of
Mhm.
intense, and like
Mhm.
we're gonna move like this. Like this is how this is gonna go for a little bit until we have those like downtime moments, and that I think touches on some of this psychology of gaming as well. Is like intentionally placing downtime moments within your game so that your characters can explore some of this stuff, and like they're not constantly like go 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 go.
Mhm.
Magic has timed that beautifully in Queen's Gambit. Like I know that he felt that like some of the characters, myself as Ulta, and like I'm gonna say heck maybe I
Mhm.
don't want to call them out, but
Mhm.
some of the characters, maybe even like Corn Dog or some of the other ones who were like all
I
the
need a
time it was like
minute.
what is
I need a
happening?
minute, right?
We need a minute. And then immediately, as soon as he felt that, he was like, all right, so you guys have 3 days. And I was like, oh, thank God. you know, but I think that's a good GM, right? Is like giving your players those break moments of, okay, so now you guys, we've done all of this story and narrative pushing. Now I'm going to hand it to you, and you guys push whatever narrative you want, and I'll change according to that. And that's in the
Mhm.
realm of D&D, because D&D you kind of have to like manipulate that a little bit differently. With
Mhm.
Monsters of the Week or Tales from the Loop, like it's all based in the narrative of the characters.
Mhm.
But it gives that psychological break.
Mhm.
Like characters aren't constantly like in that decision making mode where like all of their emotions are pumping out and they're like, oh, I have to do this and this and this and this. They can just sit around and talk about like, whatever, their backstories, who they
Mhm.
are, why they do the
Mhm.
things they do, all of that sort
Mhm.
of stuff. And it goes into like connection. And I think that's the big thing in the game is like connection is in
Right.
what it gives us.
Right. A shared experience, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
exploring that together. Absolutely.
Well, let's let's table that really quick and go to break. But I want to come back to that topic right there, the shared experience and why it's so important, not only for TTRPGs but humanity in general. Because I feel like we need a little bit of that in these trying times.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to break really quick. Reminder, and we do have one question that I'm going to ask before we go to break. Sir Heckalot wants to know, Chrissy, do you know how cool you are?
Oh, Sir Heck, I love you.
All right, guys, we'll see you in like 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Bye. And we're back.
Hello, everybody. Really quick, I know I had mentioned something before we had broke, but first, welcome to the people that just joined. We were talking about
Yes.
the psychology of game mastery with our incredible guest, Chrissy. And I would like to. I had a question from a while back that I didn't get a chance to ask when we were talking about antagonists. Um, I really want to know the people that kind of when you say, "Oh yeah, I play TTRPGs, I'm into fantasy, all of that," and they just kind of look at you with like a "Are you Satan?" kind of stare. Why do you think that is, Chrissy? Why are people so uh
Freaked
distanced,
out.
freaked out by I don't know any of that?
So I think that there's a lot of answers there. It's going to change from person to person, but you know what I think I see the most is that people just want. So when we're kids, we want to be adults. We're like so excited about growing up, being adults, doing adult things. And Sarah and I on break kind of touched on this, but like nobody teaches us quite how to do that. So then we get to these adulthood points and we're like, shit, this adult thing's like really tough. Like, and if you don't have good people showing you how to do the adult things in a good way, then it's even more difficult. And now, you know, it's all compounded. And then you bring something like fantasy or pretend or imagination play or, you know, whatever. And it's the complete opposite. It is, if we're talking scaling, it's the 180 of adulting. It's like, we're going to take adulting, paying bills, doing all of these things, and then we're going to take this fantasy world where you don't necessarily, well, I've played games where I've had to worry about paying bills, but like, you know, you have this fantasy world where you can do anything and there's no rules for the most part. I think it kind of scares people. I think that having that much freedom of like using these parts of our brains that should have been stopped in childhood. People always want to say to me, you know, well, that's childish. Well, what's wrong with being childish?
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with that? Why is that a bad thing? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of my favorite things to say back to people, even in individual therapies. We're like, well, it's childish. It's childish to do that. I'm like, what's wrong with that? You know, I also being like being in therapy, doing therapy, I regularly see to some degree that every person in the world, whoever you are, has a little kid inside of them, like right in here, that sits there and they're just a little bit damaged. Maybe a lot of bit damaged, depending on what you experienced and what happened to you or the whole 9 yards. But we have these little kids that, you know, one day we all woke up and we decided, no, we're adulting now. We have to do adult things, and you don't get to enjoy all of these kid things for yourselves anymore. Grow up, you know. How many of us have had that said to us, right? Like, grow up, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
now as adults we have these like little tiny kids in our hearts, and they're like, growing up blows, come back,
Yes.
you know. Like,
Yes. Facts.
and as
Don't
soon
do
as
it.
yeah, as soon as we start playing and we start tapping into these different things, then we're like, oh right, like this is not bad, but there's this up here, you know. And going back to that whole brain thing, where like, you know, when our brain starts pumping out things like that, we have like these emotions that are like gonna say like, no, you're an adult now. You have to go to work, grind out a 9 to 5, pay your bills, pay a mortgage, get a loan, have a white picket fence, whatever that looks like for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Being an elf doesn't play into that.
Right.
Like,
And I
you know,
think,
we get these
yes.
stigmas and these ideas of like how it shouldn't look, when the
Mm-hmm.
reality is like, there's nothing wrong with being childish to some degree. I mean,
Right.
obviously, like, you know, you got to do
Right.
some things.
Right. Yes. Right. You can't
But
be an elf all the time unless you can. In
unless you
this TED
can,
talk, I would like to, I think I think too a lot of it, quite frankly, is people aren't exposed to TTRPGs and like
as well.
they
Yeah.
just don't know. what that means and like what that is. So when they see it on paper, they're like, I don't know what that is. And I find it's interesting, like I started playing TTRPGs probably like 6 years ago, and it's funny when I started playing it, I'd be like, yeah, I have Dungeons and Dragons tonight. People would be like, oh, like, eh. Now when I say, oh, I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons tonight, people go, that's so cool. I've never had an opportunity to play that. And you are starting to see that like shift in people as it becomes like normal, as like Critical Role and like other things. Like more people are engaging like with TTRPGs as a whole. Like I've had multiple people say I've not been cool enough to be invited to a game, which like blows my mind because like this is like that nerdy thing that like cool people didn't want to do, but that is shifting, and I think for the better. But exposure is often, I think, part of it.
Absolutely. Yes, that was going to be my next point, is that stigma and exposure. So for years and years and years, when I would tell people that, like, you know, I love Dragonlance books and, you know, like, oh, I love The Hobbit and I love all of these things, people would be like, okay, nerd, you know, and I'm like, you know, and my books the bounds are broken, and they were just such a huge part of my life. Well, now it's like, oh, yeah, I love The Hobbit, I love Lord of the Rings, I love all of these things, and people are like, oh my god, yes, and I'm like, yeah, you saw the movies, right? And they're like, yeah, and I'm like, you should read the fucking books, like, you know, really get into it. But I think that there's like a different exposure now. I know that we're seeing people in different shows. Like my brain goes to like Stranger Things with the kids that play the D&D with the upside down. I think I loved that show. I was so like, good. Oh yes, this is great. Or, you know, have you mentioned Critical Role, you know, Critical Role, I think Matt Mercer played a game with Stephen Colbert, you know, and having that exposure for Red Nose Day. There were like all of these experiences now where like we're putting these kind of like nerdy experiences out into the forefront of like, hey, like this isn't so bad, it's actually pretty safe and cool, you should try it. And it gives it a different exposure and it lessens the stigma.
Yeah
Rewind to when I started playing TTRPGs, it was like, oh, you're a girl, oh, you're gonna play games,
oh no,
interesting,
oh
you know what I mean? And it was like whole different, it was a whole different vibe. And it was like, you know, being a nerd wasn't cool. Now I feel like being kind of nerdy is like
it's like different. I think Luca in chat said like it's mainstream. Like it's I think there's so many things that I think factor into that, pushing that. And like you brought up being a female in this space and how that makes things weird sometimes. Like I think even that is changing, like for the better, thank God. But yeah, like I can't tell you when the shift happened, but it did happen. And like it's bizarre to see, but also so rewarding, because again, I do think that stigma is still there. I do think it's still like, yes, like I'm being childish, but I'm not, like, because that's the other thing too, is like I think exposure to the ideas and what you're actually tackling. There's nothing childish about trying to go in and overthrow like a corrupt system of government from an evil like tyrant, and like, you know what I mean? Like these are grown up problems a lot of the times that like players are being put into. Like they're not yes, you do have your like scream and meme games where it's like, we're gonna steal the leprechaun's gold, but like a lot of the times these are heavy concepts that you're like going after and like trying to hit on. I know in the games that I'm a part of, it's like, oh no, if we don't do this, the world will end. Like that's not something that like a kid is equipped to deal with. And I think sometimes like people just don't have that exposure of like what are you doing? Like what is this? Like what kinds of stories are you telling? Cuz like I think once people realize two things, you're sitting around a table with a bunch of your friends eating tasty snacks and telling cool stories, it's like, I'm in. And then it's like, also, by the way, you get to be Aragorn now. Like you get to be fucking Iron Man now. Like you are that person. People go, oh, I see. I'm in.
It gives you a sense of power. It gives you a sense of control over some sort of reality that isn't reality. At least that's where it really started with me. Like obviously, not directly like that because how I started playing TTRPGs was just, hey, we have to accommodate my friend who broke both of his legs one December, and over Christmas break, we couldn't do anything, and so we decided to play TTRPGs, D&D, to hang out with him
Oh my
because he
gosh,
didn't
that's
need to move for
amazing.
that.
I mean, not amazing that both the legs were broken, but amazing that you guys did that.
Right? Yeah.
You know, so sweet.
Let me clarify that.
Such
Yeah,
good
But
friends.
but it's like, and you know, I started out as the forever GM for that because I feel like most of us here at TPK at one point was a forever GM. um, and so it allowed me to, you know, open up a bit. I mean, when that started happening, um, I actually, you know, after I started playing D&D, I got involved with theater. I got involved with like, I did more writing. I kind of returned to my nerdy kid roots that were beaten out of me, not physically beaten out of me, but
That
were,
little kid in
you
your
know,
heart.
yeah, society made me get rid of all of these amazing qualities, and then joining back up for D&D made me realize how incredible they were. So I think it's an incredible thing being able to take yourself out of, you know, the 9 to 5 work week and taxes and bullshit adulting, and
Yes.
put yourself in the shoes of a Minotaur barbarian for a few
Right.
hours a week.
And then you can
Yeah.
murder the taxes with your battle axe that does lightning damage.
Yes.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think all of that is so symbolic and so important because it's like, I know for myself, like, yeah, we talk about that little kid inside of us. Like, my little kid was like shy, uncomfortable, didn't know how to do like a lot of like talking. Like, if I could rewind back to 10 or 11-year-old Chrissy and be like, listen, girl, one day you're going to be on Twitch and you're going to be streaming and you're going to be talking about therapeutic gaming, I would have been like,
What?
yeah, I would have been like, never. Like that. But through all of those experiences, I get, like I get to see this little girl in me being like, yes, remember that time when we were 12 and you wanted to like do the things and all the things, do them now, do them now. And she's like standing like here now, you know what I mean? And she's like, write the story, write the campaign, do all of the things. And it's like, yeah, man, I'm going to honor that because I didn't get a chance to finish honoring that. Life showed up so quickly. And for some people,
It
and I
shows
think
up
that's
real quick.
real quick. And like, I think, not to get too deep there, but like depending on our traumas, because what happens in life happens. Um, we don't get to say like goodbye to that little kid in like a healthy way. We just shut that side of us off, and we're like, okay, so no more reading books. I don't have time for it. No more writing the stories. No more writing the poems. No more drawing the pictures. No more, doing all of these things. Instead, we're gonna fill it up with all these other things. And then to come back into an environment with a group of collaboratively thinking people where like all of us are doing the same thing, so we're all having this kind of very mutual experience. It's a very mutual aided relationship, and like we have people being like, yeah, heck, write the song, like
Yes.
write the song, or like, yeah, proper, write the campaign, or yeah, Tony, do the Emerald Rocklet. Like we like have all of these things where we're like, yes, do the things, like do all of them. Honor that inside of you and explore it and write the shit out of it. And I love like how TPK's like motto has kind of become like make dope shit.
Make dope shit.
But it's
Yes.
also like treat yourself. Like
Yes.
treat yourself.
Like,
Like honor that little kid inside of you and like let them have those moments that we never got to have. And let other people do the things that might not have happened for you when you were a little kid. I didn't have a ton of people in my life when I was little that were like, yeah, Chrissy, write the stories. Yeah,
do
Chrissy,
the thing.
do the things, I hit a certain point and they were like, yo, girl, you got to get a job. You got to help me with
Yes.
your car insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you want a cell phone,
Girl.
you're paying for
Girl.
it. And I'm like,
Girl.
but I just want to read this book back here. I don't want to do that.
Listen, I gotta be really honest with you. When they were on their way to Mordor, there was no mention of insurance. So
Yeah,
I don't know
like,
what this means.
And I mean, I know that out there, and if you're watching this and you did have that very healthy conversation with people in your life, I know that some of this might not connect for you, but I do know what usually does connect is that, like, that disconnect from that child that,
Mm-hmm.
like, none of us never get the full ability to say goodbye to, or to have like a healthy goodbye to, um, whether it was, you know, healthily introduced or not. But we get to explore it now, and I think that that helps with the, you know, Tyrant wanted to touch on like the mutual aid, like the community of all of it. And I don't know what your question necessarily is, but like that idea of like me as like a shy little girl at 12 years old, fast forward a lot of years,
Mm-hmm.
enough years, and then I sit
We
here and I
don't
get
we
to,
don't need to get into the numbers.
yeah, we don't need the numbers. But fast forward a handful of years, and like we have communities out there that are giving space to people to say like, here, explore this.
Mm-hmm.
um, Therapeutic games do that. Here, explore this. Like, hey,
Yes.
take this. um, and regular games do that too. We touched on that in the first episode. Like, you could
Mm-hmm.
do therapeutic things in regular games and not even realize you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that mutual aid of I'm going to give you the freedom to do this, and when I go to do this thing, all you need to do is just like stand over here
Right.
and just clap for me.
Yes. And I think and what you said kind of feeds back to a question that Purple had earlier. But like I think getting to explore those different parts of not only like the little kid, but like who you are, right? Like, and I think GMing gives a different opportunity because players, you're like sitting down, you're like, I am this one person. But a GM, you're like, I am this person and I'm portraying this person, I'm portraying this person, and I'm telling this story and I'm doing this thing. And it gives you like a wider opportunity to kind of like express different parts of you and like, especially in a long term campaign, like embed yourself in the narrative and like get those little tiny snippets of it. Like at full disclosure, some of my NPCs are just like my personality traits dialed to like 10
Yes.
or 11. Like that's it. I would like to say like I crafted this character and I no, it's just Sarah with like an Azuth mask on. Like that's it. Like it's just that's what it is. But I think like it's and then being the communal part, the shared experience part is like it's so validating to sit down and say this is this part of me that like normally I would suppress because society says like not cool, man, and like suppressing that and then getting to able to show that in a game, to express that in a game, and everybody going yes and like pushing forward and like letting me like explore that part not only as a player but as a GM, right? Like validating this part of me that like now I can be like, oh, that feels good. And now I feel less bad about this part of myself. And I can, when I put it away, now it's being put away with good feelings, not
Mm-hmm.
just like shame and like, I hate this part of myself, which I
Yeah.
think is great.
Yeah, and that goes back to the science of what our brains do during playing games, right? So we have experiences that our brains relate, right? Like, so if I have an experience of, and I'm just like making this up as I go, if I have an experience of talking to somebody and it going very, very horribly and us getting into a screaming match, my brain will take that and just kind of embed it in there and go, okay, so this
No
experience is
go.
what happens, and I don't like that. So we're going to try to either avoid that at all costs or whatever the case is, however it wants to adaptively cope. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what RPGs do, and TTRPGs, and even to some degree just gaming in general, is that you have these experiences, right? Like I can have a disagreement with a character in game, and what it does is it's called neuroplasticity, where like your brain reforms the idea that like the way that it relates it back is not the same. So like I'm no longer relating this argument as a bad thing, and I'm relating it now into, oh, so we had some open communication. I got to do all of these things. Maybe I can take that from fake life in the game to real life, and I can start applying some of that. And our brains start kind of adapting to these new experiences. And it's like, oh, my brain can heal from this. I can change the way that I'm coping with things because of the way that I handle myself in games. And as a GM, it's important to remember that. Like, the things that happen in game are related directly, usually to real life stuff. And we can take those experiences and be like, hey, when you guys do these things, like, apply it out there, because it's not just happening around this table, but like the big picture table, like across the world, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all could do with like our brains changing and adapting in a way that's like, oh, I had this really bad experience. I want to reframe that into something positive, and doing that sitting around a table with a bunch of people who are supportive of that. I know for a fact if I were to probably DM any of the GMs that I play with in TPK, and I were to say, hey, listen, I have this thing going on, and I really, if it comes out in gameplay, this is what it's going to look like, and this is what I kind of want to do with it, they would be like, all right, cool. There would never be a like, no, don't put that in my campaign. How dare you?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like in real life, if I did some of those things,
Ooh,
right?
keep
If
that
I was
shit
just
to
like,
yourself.
yeah, if I was sitting at dinner and I was like, hey guys, FYI, like I have this thing going on and I'd really like to explore it, everyone would be like, that's nice. Mm-hmm.
Right. Cool
And they would
story,
try to
bro.
they would try to be supportive, but there's no solution in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the game, I could try all these different things, and the DMs and the GMs would give me space to try that, and then like maybe I'll shoot out into real life and try it there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes into that relationship of the GM with the game and with the world. My as a GM, all of my NPCs are things that I know, people that I know, parts of me, like,
Yes.
even like
Yes.
I have like a family of goblins in my women's therapeutic game. I had this family of goblins, and they were like, named like Bobbin, Robin, Stobbin. Like I just like
Very good.
just fucked up the
Very
names like
good.
as I went. But like each one of them had a different personality where it was like reflective of my friends, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Because I do what I know, and then I get to like play with that. Like, how would, you know, Boblin the Goblin respond, even though I know it's supposed to be like Kelly, my best friend. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would never name her that in a game, but like in general, just
I
kind
would.
of
I'm
like,
just kidding.
but just using that as an example, like, hey, how can I explore this as a person, or like, what can I do with this, or whatever that looks like, and having the ability, player versus player and player versus not versus, but like, across the board, how can I have a supportive relationship with that? It's super super interesting.
Mhm. And that's actually something that I wanted to bring up is we kind of mentioned that shared experience before we went to break, and I feel like this ties in with Purple Bill's question really nicely. Um, as a GM, you have to really be mindful of your table, what they expect, what you're expecting, but also what's going on with your players, and how they're feeling about the game, how they're feeling in real life. Um, and if something happens, you the GM as a GM, you want to make sure that your players are okay, and to give them a sense of release in the game. For a lot of people, and we've discussed this, TTRPGs are an escape from reality,
Yes.
an escape from all of the pressures and all of the bad things.
Mm-hmm.
So for a non-licensed person, for a lay person, as you put it, Chrissy, um, how can a GM make a game therapeutic, helpful in a sense? What are some tips, some strategies that can be used? One thing that comes to mind, really, prep work is a session zero. Session zeros are extremely important for pretty much everything that we do. So
Yes.
I can imagine that would be also very important for a game where the GM would want to, make it a little more therapeutic. But what are some ideas that you have?
Yeah, so I mean, first I'm gonna say, like, across the board, if you don't have experience with, doing therapy, I would not suggest focusing your game into therapeutics. But if you want to bring in some of those topics into your games, like, I'll use depression as an example. I think that was actually the one I used on the last episode. So say that, like, one of your characters experiences depression, not one of your players, one of your NPCs, because you never want to put that onto a character that's playing the game. If you want to explore, Boblin the Goblin who experiences depression, and you want the players to help with that, uh, I think that having those session zeros are key in saying, like, hey, some of these topics are going to be kind of intense. I do have some NPCs who experience A, B, C, or D. Or there's going to be A, B, C, or D in this game. Um, just things like that. In making sure they know, like, there's a chance you could encounter this, depending on what you do. And I just glanced at chat, and
Soblin the
Soblin the
Goblin.
Goblin is very good, and I'm
Why
gonna
is
use that
purple the
now.
best one?
Dude, that's very fucking good. I'm gonna steal that. So that's very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
Yoink.
that. Yoink. Yeah. So, letting them know, like, as a DM, I am going to have NPCs that are going to be exploring some of this stuff. That does not mean your characters in any way, shape, or form have to engage, react, do anything. But just so you never want to push therapeutic experience on people. That's the quickest way for them to be like, no, I'm not here for fucking therapy. That's not the point. They're here
I'm
to
here to
play a
play a
game and
game.
to
Yeah.
disappear. Um, but if some of those kind of, like, themes start showing up, it's always important to just always be talking about it. Like, hey guys, we touched on some pretty intense stuff. Like, how are you feeling? Are we getting too far into this, like, into this narrative? Because we can dial it back a little bit. I will always also deviate to, like, make sure you're checking with professionals. If you have a question about, like, hey, I don't know if maybe my game's, like, a little bit too crazy, um, talk to people about it. Ask them. Ask other DMs. Ask other GMs. Say, hey, have you ever experienced this, or have you ever played with this concept or idea in a game? Um, Use that mutual aid to be like, hey, what do you think that would look like? Do you think that would be too much? And it's like, oh yeah, probably. Or, oh no, I've done that with characters. This is how I did it, but you don't have to do it like that. Um, you can explore those topics, but just watch how you're diving into them. Because if you don't have the experience of how to handle the aftermath with them, then you're just hurting people. And that's the complete opposite of what we want to do with gaming. We don't want to
Mhm.
hurt people with it. Um, but that doesn't mean it's not also possible.
Right. So I just want to jump in because I think there's a couple of points I just want to like kind of so to sum up in the list, right? So communicating with your players, right? Like refer to professionals when appropriate, and if you're not sure, ask, talk about it. Don't be afraid to stop the game. Like if you need to stop, stop, and check in. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the big ones. Just making sure. And again, it's what I love about these conversations that we're having is like it keeps repeating those ideas of like this is how you safely run a game, and I love that because I think more people need to consider, you know, kindness in their TTRPGs.
Yeah, and I mean, understanding fully, I'm gonna go to Strahd for this, right? Like, understanding that you can address some shit.
Oh yeah.
Like, you can address some shit in games. But, like, everyone, and I'll use Dark Echoes and Darkest Night, Brightest Lights, like, you can address some pretty intense things, um, and still do it in a safe way. You can
Mm-hmm.
still have those moments of, like, oh, I'm going to, I know that me as a DM, I feel A, B, C, or D way, and I know Sarah as a character or Ty as a character feel A, B, C, or D way. We're going to explore that. I'm going to push that and kind of, like, just kind of edge that narrative on a little bit. so that they can explore it if they want to and choose to. But ultimately, we're going to talk about some uncomfortable shit. But knowing that before they go into it, so there's no surprise of, oh yeah, and by the way, Strahd is like a huge D-bag.
The
When everyone else
worst.
is like, I thought he was like a cool dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if it need, I know, yeah, I don't know. I'm just like, if you don't know it, and then
Right.
suddenly you're faced with it, you're like, oh shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'd be concerned with that group. Oh,
yeah.
Strahd's a cool guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's, I mean, but if you don't know the story, right? Like if you don't know what game you're walking into, and you think it's just going to be a run of the mill game, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you're faced with this guy or this big bad evil dude, um, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're like, well, what the fuck? You know, the DM didn't warn us. We had no idea. We didn't know kids were gonna. We didn't know this was.
Right.
And then we
Mm-hmm.
got and then the
Mm-hmm.
things with the.
Yep.
What is happening? You
This
know,
place sucks.
yeah. Um, so it's like, you know, make sure you're having those conversations. And I'm gonna deviate back to Queen's Gambit and just talk up TPK a whole bunch today. Apparently, um, Magic was super honest with us out of the gate. Like it's gonna be a fast, quick. We're jumping in, and this is
Mm-hmm.
an intense campaign. There was no secret about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there was no question. We knew what we were getting into. Did I expect it to the degree as the player? No, but I knew it. I knew it
Right.
was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, to some degree, it's like I knew this was happening. It's just how am I as a player and a character going to deal with it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the interesting bit. But
A
Yes.
couple more things to add to that kind of list that I guess we've been creating
Yes.
of quintessential GMing techniques and things. One, I think we discussed already is let your players, your characters, take a breather every now and then. I
Yes.
think Magic's you have 3 days before you have to go back into it. I think that's incredible, and I feel like that also kind of translates over to Raw Curse of Strahd a little bit too. Not necessarily the breather part of it because you really don't have time in Curse of Strahd. But they built in moments of peace, serenity, of
Interludes.
comedy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Kind of breaks in the general theme and tone of the campaign,
mm-hmm.
to add levity, to add a sense of, okay, we don't have to always be uh, pulling our hair out and on the watch for evil everything all the
Right.
time. Sometimes we can just take a breather
Right.
and live.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think that speaks a little bit to like the fantasy of the game because in real life it can feel like you don't have time for a break. You can't just like sit down and process what the fuck just happened to you because you've got work and you've got bills and you got to do your laundry and also your dog needs a walk and then tomorrow you got to go visit your grandma. Like it just keeps coming at you. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important. I mean, if we're exploring the fantasy concept of games, right? If we get to like sit down and this can be whatever we want it to be, why wouldn't we have like moments where we can be like, hey, so listen, you just like did a bunch of crazy shit. Do you want to just sit down and like feel those feelings and not suppress them and not move on, just move on to the next thing, right? Like what if we take this fantasy to the next level and actually like try to deal with some shit as it happens instead of, you know, like 20 years later when you're sitting down across from a therapist and being like it all began, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think you guys touch on a lot of really great points. It's like, you know, it's easy for us to get lost in life, and it's easy for us to get lost in game. It, we've all probably been in campaigns or games where like we started out, you know, in water deep, and suddenly we're in another plane of existence, and how the fuck did we get here? Like it's like
Yes.
what happened? Like where did this go? And it's always that important moment of like being able to slow down and go like, okay, so we started at point A,
Mhm.
we're now at Z, but like, what did all of that in between look like? Like,
Mhm.
how did I end up making some of these choices and feeling these feelings and doing all of these things? Um, and our brains want that. So, like, going back into like the science of things, like our brains, we experience something called cognitive dissonance, where like we constantly have these two varying cognitions in our brains, right? Where like you'll think one thing and the complete opposite, and our brains automatically just want to resolve it. It wants to get rid of cognitive dissonance, and it wants us to have like just stability. So most of the time our brains go into thinking the negative, right? Like
Survival, right? Like
survival,
assume the
yeah.
worst.
Assume the worst, and it is what it is. So like I think those downtime moments give our brains that like space to attempt to start equaling out those cognitions of like, man, this is really terrible what is happening, and man, my character really loved this bit. And it's like we're doing like this constantly, and those slow down moments allow it to be like less like this
Mm-hmm.
and more like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, now I'm connecting some of these. I did this because of this, and this is happening because of this. And like now we're like at a level playing field. Um, and our brains do this stuff
Mm-hmm.
without us doing
Right.
much.
We're just like moving through, like we're just hurtling through space and time. And like the
Mhm.
chemicals in our brain sac are just kind of like trying to like connect dots as we go. And sometimes you just need to stop and say, like, I'll just, as a GM in my campaign, The Bard's Refrain, it was like, I kept like trying to push my narrative. And it became very clear to me, like, if I don't stop and give these players just a hot second to be like, what the fuck just happened? Or like have a conversation, they're gonna like they're not gonna be able to engage in the story, so I'm not gonna be able to get what I want. They're not gonna be able to figure out what their characters are actually wanting to do, so they're not gonna get what they want. And like if we add the streaming part of it, like it's not gonna be entertaining. It's not entertaining to have characters who are constantly in crisis. Like
Mhm.
it's not fun to sit at that table and just be like, I'm always feel like existential dread and like fear, and not because of like the situation, but because I've never had a chance, like as a player or GM, to be like, and here's where we are. And like I think it's like lesson for me is like program more of those moments. Like let's take a breather. How we feeling? What's going on? You doing okay there, bud? Like having those little slow down moments is
Mhm.
huge.
Yes, yeah. And I like that you touched on the streaming piece of it, because like obviously here we are,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we have to remember that to some degree this is like a very parasocial relationship. Like we are entertainers, and we're here for a reason, and we're supposed to make this entertaining so that we have people watching. And um, it's not just sitting at our kitchen table anymore throwing
It's
around click-clack
different.
rocks. it's
Mhm.
it's different. There has to be that level of difference there, and that adds another level of difference up here with processing. um, and and we have to remember that to some degree there's an added stressor of like, okay, well, my favorite thing is like I have chat popping off. We have 15 good tables.
Mhm.
Mr. Rogers just tossed you guys like three different TPK cards or like whatever's
Mhm.
happening, and there's all this chaos. And then there's the chaos of the game.
Mhm.
There's what my character would do, and then the DM enacting consequence because of A, B, C, or D of what happened in the game. So there's like all of these different things, and our brains, our prefrontal cortex is just like pop, 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 because it's like it's decision making, it's social behavior interactions, it's personality exploration, it's cognitive planning, it's resolving cognitive dissonance. It's like all of these like legitimate science things happening, like tink, 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 and it's like being an entertainer,
Mhm.
doing
Mhm.
things to entertain people. Like, so there's like all of these different things. To not have those moments to like slow down and be like, all right, you know, um,
So that just happened.
that was a thing, you know. And I know that to some degree, like you guys have had the experience. I know I have had the experience of like literally on screen, because I am terrible at hiding my face. Like you guys will know when I am reacting to something. Like I have had games where I'm like,
What do I do?
or like my jaw will literally drop, or I'm like, you could like literally see my brain trying to process all the things.
Mhm.
Um, that's not a bad thing to have happen. But if you have those consistently without the ability to slow down and allow your brain to like just play catch up, kind of separate everything out into kind of compartmentalize it, like, oh, okay, I need these feelings to go back to I need the hippocampus to remember this for later. I need to remember this map for this. I need to remember this riddle part for this. I need the cerebellum to like stick this part in. Like, I need my character, like, there's like different parts of your brain that just need the time to slow down and like hold on and grasp onto the things it's trying to do. And then the following game, it's like, oh, we feel a little bit more like a team. It feels a little bit more mutual aid-y. It feels a little bit more connected. It feels a little bit more of all of these things because we've given up the time to our brains and to our players,
Right.
of like, okay, process that out. However, once you want to make that look for you, flavor it however you like. But what's that look like for you? What's your character feeling?
Right. I think something you just said like really resonated with me. Like if we're talking like therapy and like mental health and like gaming and stuff, I think taking those moments too is huge. Like Sarah as a human person, like I think if we can be vulnerable for a second, really struggles with like expressing emotions or struggle or like if something's difficult, it's like don't talk about it, just deal. And I think like when you have these like pause moments and when you're talking through like the TTRPG, and you already talked about this a little bit, but it's like playing TTRPGs has taught me how to like talk to people about these things. Like I think like through that, Sarah the human, still working on it, is like able to more actively engage with those emotions and share them with like a group. You know what I mean? Like because in like an art playing like a role playing session or a game, it's like my character is experiencing this and needs to communicate that, or we can't solve this puzzle. And that's translated to real life of like Sarah is feeling these feelings and she needs to talk to her friends, family, coworkers, whoever, so we can solve the puzzle that is like life. You know what I mean? And like watch, and it's the more I do it, the more I like see like the direct parallels. I've talked a little bit like the character Veldani, and like that was huge for me. Like a lot of like processing, because I think we all bring little bits and pieces of ourselves, right? And then you get to explore it and validate it, and then like, okay, now we're gonna take this, and then you have those moments of calm where you really like the realization and the dots connect of like, oh, this is how I'm going to act going forward, or this is how I'm going to handle this, or whatever. And it does, I think, at least for me personally, has translated to that real life of like, hey man, it's cool to talk about your feelings with your friends sometimes. Like where before it'd be like, never let them know that you've ever felt a feeling in your entire life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes back to the stigma of, and I said I wasn't going to drink more coffee.
Oh, girl, you're crazy.
here I am. Let's see how zooted I can get on stream today. So yeah, like I think that, and we talked about this on the first time I was on, about how really we can connect in different ways to different things. And if we don't have a space to like explore that, or if we never had that space, like I can completely identify, and I think a lot of people can, with like, as you get older and as life starts showing up, throwing temper tantrums and expressing yourself through heavy crying is that's relegated to doing it in the shower where no one can hear you. And that's meant as a joke, but I know that some people have had that experience, right? Like you don't just like feel your feelings outwardly. I, on the other hand, I'm like one of those people where like, yeah, I kind of do, but that's because I've had practice in doing it. And if you've never had that, or you don't know where to go to play with that idea of how do I do that? How do I feel these feelings? And then how do I apply that to real life? The safest place you could do it is inside of a game where you can't break anything.
Yes.
Like you can't hurt, like, sure, you might break your DM's narrative, but that's on us as the DM. Like,
right. That's that's the social contract that you're kind of like entering into. It's like I have this expectation of telling the story, and players have the expectation of playing their characters. Sometimes those aren't going to align, and like you have to be able to like adjust. If and this is my piece of advice. If you have a story that you want to tell so bad, just write a book.
Yes.
Write a story. Like
Absolutely.
if it's dependent on like you wanting to do that thing, there's a separate medium. But if you want that kind of flexibility of people interacting, DMing is the answer.
Yes. Yeah. And I think Ty touched on this a little bit earlier. Like, getting this opens that door up into other creative avenues. Listen, if you're playing a game and you realize, like, oh, I'm DMing and they're not doing what I want them to do, I'm going to write a story instead. That's legit. You know, I'm sure your players will be stoked on reading that story, wanting to know how that story ends. That doesn't mean that's how the game should go. That's not the point, right? And I think it also adds into, like, oh, I really like the RP end of this. Well, now I'm gonna go try public acting. I'm gonna go do local theater stuff. I'm gonna try doing voiceover stuff. I find these different avenues that I can, like, explore. Where before, when we were, we talk about that little kid inside of us. If I would have said to people when I was talking again back to, like, little 10 or 11-year-old Chrissy, and been like, you're gonna play games for a living. You're gonna get paid to do that. I would have been like, you're fucking high. Like, I would have, like, it would have been a joke, right?
Yeah.
But here we are, all of us to some degree, like, whether it's what we do professionally forever or whatever, like, sitting in around a table at TPK, the proverbial table, it's like, oh no, I get to do this. And I get to do this with people who are going to support me in exploring all of these other bits. Like, I'm gonna go out for this voiceover job. I'm gonna try to do this. I'm gonna write this RPG that I've been dreaming about. I'm gonna do these things. Like, well, yeah, like, let's do that. Explore those places. Explore those emotions. The things that you never got to do when you were little, because it was like,
Right. Right. Absolutely. Like it's practice in a weird way, right? Like, you're practicing these parts of yourself that, like, in a safe environment where you can't break things. And it, like, 100% for me is reflected in, like, maybe I will say this out loud now because I feel more prepared to handle whatever comes at me, because at least it can't be a dragon. So I mean, like, that's worst case scenario. We already cleared that. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah. My favorite thing in the world to do is to ask people, like, worst case scenario, what would happen?
Oh,
worst
yeah.
case scenario. Like, what's the worst case scenario? Like, sometimes there's, like, some pretty serious answers there,
Sure.
depending on the situation, but that's not the question you ask in those moments. Like, if somebody's like, oh, I have this, and I'm like, what's worst case scenario? And they're like, I die. I'm like, wrong question. Shouldn't have asked that one. That's a shit outcome. But, like, if we're talking about, like, personality exploration and cognitive planning and doing all of these things, what's the worst that could happen? It won't work. So you just try something else, right? And that can sound so easily, like, attainable and doable, but it is actually a legitimately difficult action to take.
Yes.
Like, in our real life, like, it can be a hard thing to apply.
Yes.
So it's like, practice it here.
Yes. And, like, in a group setting.
Here.
Yeah. Right. Watch how other people respond to the same problem, right? Because that's the other thing too, is, like, as a GM, I'll be like, hello, I have crafted this problem for you. Enjoy. And they go, oh, we're going to do this thing that you absolutely didn't even consider, and we're just going to, like, blaze through this in, like, 2 seconds. And you go, cool. Very cool. I totally intended for you to do that. Or the opposite of, like, I'm going to throw this meaningless whatever, and they're like, we're going to overanalyze this for 4 hours. And you go, huh. But it's a learning experience, right? And from the player perspective too, like, I know for me, I play in a lot of games with Ty. Ty and I have very different approaches to, like, narrative and gameplay. But one of the things that I'm always, like, impressed by is, like, watching Ty engage with, like, problems. I was like, I never considered that. I never considered that as an option. And now I have that going forward of, like, I've seen someone else problem solve in a safe place and can now use that, like, not only for my own characters, but, like, in other situations as well. Like, this is a viable thing that I never would have considered ever.
So, not to put you guys on the spot, but can you give an example without spoilers? Because
without spoilers.
Well, I
Ty's
mean, I feel like well, without spoilers, there's
Or
a
at least vague
situation.
ones. Like you can
Yeah,
yeah.
vaguely,
there's a situation going on in Roundhouse right now where I feel like Sarah and I are like here. Like I'm suggesting like these things,
Oh,
and Sarah's
mm-hmm.
like, I don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like both would be okay, but like
Mm-hmm.
it's obvious that we're coming from two very different places.
Right,
You
right.
know?
I think the best way to describe it is Ty's like, let's fucking go balls to the wall. Like he is like, let's get weird with it. And I always approach it with like a very much like, okay, let's be realistic about our expectations here. And like those are polar opposites. Like I think that a lot of times he's very like, and that it's inspiring. Like he'll come into a situation, he's like, no, I'm gonna do some buck wild shit. And like my version of buck wild shit is like, I'm a bonus action. Like, you know what I mean? So it's just it's very different approaches, but like I'm trying to think of a specific instance where like something that's already played out. I mean, we can go to the last
uh, Purple
uh-oh.
Fill in chat. Ty goes for the raise the 500-foot tall skeleton.
Yes. And I love that though. Like it's very good. Like as you were doing it, I'm like, this is everything. But like at the same time, like inside I was like, but here's all the repercussions that will come of this act. Like, you know, and I think but watching Ty like explore that space where like he's not overly concerned about the consequences. Like it's like I want to do this thing and then doing that thing versus me where it's like here are the consequences, what thing can I do? It's like an opposite response, right? But again, I get to watch him do that. I get to learn from him doing that and see like what works, what doesn't, and it's in a safe environment. Like versus like the opposite direction, like I just get to bring my program or project manager to every game that I play, and everyone goes, yes, Sarah, delegate now.
Well, but I think this. So the reason I asked that is because across the board, I think it just adds to the conversation of mutual aid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody has these abilities and strengths and these things that make them fucking amazing. Like I am the biggest fan of humans. Like I
They're
think
so
people are
cool.
just so amazing. And like even the most like boring run of the mill person, you have a story and you have assets and things that you bring to the table that are wholly and completely yours. And when we look at characters, when we're exploring these outside things of ourselves that we've never explored before, a character like Ty's who's like embracing the chaos, for somebody like Sarah's character who's like, you know, I need it all labeled with like,
There's always
with
a
all of
level
the
of like,
consequences,
right, reserved.
like
Let's think this
reserve.
through. Mm-hmm.
Down the road, when Sarah's character goes in and tries the chaotic thing, she's gonna have a fucking Ty's gonna be standing back there going, fuck yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, like you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean. Like you're gonna have a
Mm-hmm.
cheerleader in your corner of like
Mm-hmm.
yes, and then when Ty does the more reserved thing where he's like, well, okay, I want to like do the thing, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna do this thing
And
first.
I'm like,
It
let's
doesn't
talk
work.
through a plan of like, I've got that missing step for you, my dude. Let's go. Like,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
and then you have that mutual aid of like, oh, my assets now become something that you can explore as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I love that part about gaming across the board in therapeutic TTRPGs. Like, I on a regular basis get to watch people witness something from someone else and be like, ooh, that went really well. I'm gonna try that one day. I'm gonna try that one day.
Mm-hmm.
Or ooh, that went really badly. Maybe we should just not fucking do that again.
Oh
I
yeah.
I think a great example of that is before before TPK and before engaging with certain members of TPK, I was very much the read the situation and react kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
Not only in games but in life. And then I met Saint, and Saint introduced me to Smash Cut,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, "You have the power here to do whatever you want. There are no rules. Just say it and it happens." And it
Mm-hmm.
took me a second. And then I just went with it. And I've kind of been taking that energy and just going with it in all of my games since then. Because it's like, why why am I not doing this? Why am I not trying to make the coolest things happen? You know?
Mhm.
Like, obviously that plays into some situations very interestingly, like raising a cataclysmic sized skeleton and almost killing the entire party.
Physics, my dude.
Sometimes you're like, yes, let's make the most fantastical thing happen, and then you realize, oh wait, but also physics. Um, but it's stuff like that. I like the ability to um, take the ideas or even the simple notions that I have about certain situations and see what I can do with them. And
Mhm.
I've never been able to do that before. Before TPK, before getting really
Right.
invested in improv and TTRPGs and stuff. And
Mhm.
so,
I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
well,
Oh, go
go
for it.
ahead.
Go for it. Oh,
No, no.
I'm just gonna hop in. There's in one of the games I play, the player's catchy, and if we're talking like watching like a creative like problem solving thing and learning from that and like taking that guy, he approaches this game with a level of creativity and like bends the fabric of the rule system against itself to his own benefit in a way that like I literally like have to stop and be like, how the fuck did he get there? And also, why didn't I think of that? Like
Mhm.
the way that he like interprets rules and answers and all the things, it's just like, oh my god. Like I don't from a GM perspective, he is like a both inspiring, like so cool, would love to have at my table, but terrifying because it's like he's gonna take that thing and like there's nothing that you could give him a feather and be like, you have this gap to like cross, and he'd be like, well, I have this spell. So I'm like, literally, we had a huge chasm. The water was like 300 feet below, and he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna shape or control water. I'm just gonna bring up that water and turn it into a water bridge, and we're gonna cross this. And it was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna do that. What? Like everybody else is thinking about how to fly over, like, and there's that creativity of just like, oh my god, like, how did you do that? But then again, what like with Ty's embracing the chaos or Akechi's like use the system against itself, like just sitting there in the same table and being an information sponge of like all these different ideas, and then again like applying them in the game in future characters or in the having my characters be influenced by them, but also going out into real life and being like, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah, I am gonna get a quart of frozen custard because embrace the chaos. Like it's you know what I mean? What's the worst that
Yeah.
can happen?
Yeah, sometimes it is just literally so in therapy a lot of what I do is um removing emotion from it and looking at it from because we make decisions whether it's in game or in real life where we make decisions based on like the emotions. We want to have the best emotions all the time. So we're going to make decisions to try to make that happen all the time. We want success, so we're going to try to make the decision that gives you success. We want happiness, we want pleasure, we want whatever. So we're going to try to do that all the time. So in therapeutic gaming or in therapy across the board, my goal is for my players to take the emotion out of it in a sense where like worst case scenario, what are we looking at? Do we have evidence? Is that real? Is that legitimate? Or is this based in emotion and feeling? Are we pulling from like our emotion brain right now? And are you just running on all cylinders? Like let's pull that back a little bit and like make some decisions with our frontal brains. Like let's pull that a little bit differently. And that doesn't mean you can't be chaotic and do exciting and fun things. You can do all the fun things and do all of the exciting things and be that catalyst to chaos to whatever degree, and then kind of like go from there. I do really quickly want to touch on a question in chat though.
Yes.
Um, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Zarina said we have a very shy person in our game, and now he's playing the face of Bard.
I
Is
love
there more
that.
you can do to help him? So like I don't know if that's necessarily directed for us. I'm going to answer it anyways though.
Hmm.
But I think we've touched on that just recently. So I think the cool thing about gaming in general is that if you want to see something, start doing it. Because the more comfortable you get with doing that, the more comfortable the people around you are going to get with doing it. You want to go hijinksy, lean into the hijinks, lean into whatever is happening. And if the person's playing a bard, just remember, like, bards can look like anything and do anything. His or hers or their style of being a bard um, just might not look the way you think it should. And ask them. Ask a question. Hey, I noticed that, like, you're a bard, but you don't do A, B, C, or D with musical instruments. Are you kind of going for like more like poetic bard, or are you not leaning into the music aspect of it at all? Are you more of like a performance bard? Do you need to like mime your way out of shit? Like, whatever that looks like. Um, just ask them a question, and then um, start kind of displaying that or setting them up. I think DMF Saint, if you have questions on how to like play help like fun games, Saint's Murder and Coffee episode about improv, go watch that, because he gives a lot of really healthy tips on how to help the players in your games um, really expand themselves as players. From a therapeutic sense, how can you help them open up? Make it comfortable and safe for them. When they finally do the thing, when they finally play the instrument or sing the song or do the, as somebody I think Purple said, interpretive dance, if they are, do
Yes.
whatever, when they do the thing, cheer them on. Give them all the supportive feedback you can. Do, that was killer when you did that. I can't believe it. That was so fucking cool. Even if you think as a person it was kitschy or silly, that's not the point. The point is to kind of like create a space where like they can do the bard thing, whatever that bard thing looks like for them. Whether and you don't have to like sing in your games to be a bard, but like when they go to cast the spell or they go to do whatever and they flavor it the way that they want to, support that. Give them that safe space to like do it. Set them up to like really feel like they're connecting with that part of their character. Just allow them to be successful, whatever that looks like. Um, I mean, I don't know. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
would do. If I was sitting at a table and I was DMing and I knew there was a bard who was a little bit shy and wasn't super talkative, I'd lean into that. I'd have a conversation with them. I'd talk about it. And then I'd turn around, and when they finally did the thing, whatever that thing looked like, I'd be like, fuck yeah, like, killed it. And I would make sure as the DM to give them a success.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't care if they roll a natural one on that roll.
Right.
When they go to cast that thing and they flavor it the way and they do the thing, it's going to succeed somehow.
Right.
Maybe not the way that it looks like
Mm-hmm.
to everybody, but like it's going to succeed. They're going to have a success so that I can
Right.
reinforce, like, yes, when you do the thing, fucking cool shit happens, and keep doing cool shit.
Yep. Yep. Reward. It's like the rule of cool. Reward people growing and like doing something different and playing to their character, right? Even if it's as simple as like inspiration. You know what I mean? Like that's my go-to. Like you did a dope thing. Inspiration. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not going to work out. Maybe you did crit one or whatever, but like you're getting something out of this as like a yes, that more, please. You're crushing it.
Right. Absolutely. So I hope that
Reward,
helped. I don't
immersion,
know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
um, well, uh, thank you so much, Chrissy. We are getting to the end of our show. Chrissy, I want to thank you again so much for coming on for the second uh, kind of follow-up episode of our therapeutic TTRPG episode. We do have one more question I want to ask Chrissy before we get out of here. Um, Chrissy, Cole wants to know, where do you see the future of therapeutic gaming and TTRPGs, or where do you see the future of TTRPGs, and also where do you see yourself in the future related to all of
Ooh.
this?
Wow. Wow, Cole. What a good question. Um, I think that this platform right here is huge. I think that this 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 community TPK across the board and Twitch and streaming, whether you're streaming on Facebook or you're streaming on Twitch or you're streaming on YouTube or whatever that case is, that live in your face kind of ability to play a game in front of people is going to add into and create a lot more opportunities for people to like have the exposure that they need to try it. Find a game shop somewhere in their town, all of that stuff. I do see it kind of like in an uptick. I also think that gaming across the board now is in the uptick. We now have like, listen, if they have scholarships for playing games to go to higher education and play fucking games on leagues. If you would have told me that when I was a kid, I'd have been like, what? I can like play. I mean, at the time it was like Tomb Raider or whatever the fuck game it was,
Mm-hmm.
but like I could play Tomb Raider in college on a team. What the fuck? Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously not the same, but like
Right.
if you would have told me that back, I'm like, fuck, like that's cool. Like we have now this different understanding of what it can do. There's a lot more science behind the supportive end of it. For a really long time, games were looked at with this like negative connotation of like people just sitting in front of TVs for a really long time, and zoning out and the gray matter in their brain expanding, blah blah blah. We've literally changed the narrative on that. Like it's just not a thing. We know it not to be true. Like it's just not.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So with that changing, it's changing our access to it. And that's what I think platforms like this are really cool and helpful for. Conventions, gaming things. I see it kind of continuing to expand in different ways. Um, I'm excited to see where it goes. I get excited when I think about where gaming's going to be. I like the idea of VR and like all of the upcoming things that like are wildly imaginative, and really where we can take gaming, whether it's in front of a computer playing D&D, in front of a console, whatever that looks like. Really where it's heading. I think it's going to be really fucking cool. I would love to see more TTRPGs expand into like, obviously emotion exploration, cognitive planning, things like that. So that's where I hope to go. I always jokingly say like one day I'm gonna work for Game to Grow or the Bodhana Group. Like that's like
No joking. No
real.
joking. Let's fucking go.
But I need
No,
more
no joke.
experience. Like we'll
Mm-hmm.
get there.
Yeah.
I always joke about it with Jack. He's from Bodhana. I always tell him like, "Are you ready to be my boss yet?" Like every time I chat with him, I don't talk with him too often, but
Mm-hmm.
whenever I do, I always like make the joke.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'd like to, my dream picture is to have like a little shop somewhere where, in the back is a couple of therapeutic offices where me and my friends have, you can come in and do an individual therapy, and next door you can play some games.
I
Like,
love that.
just keep it all together. Have a little cafe in there,
I
drink a
want to
cup of
go to
coffee.
there.
Yeah,
Nice.
like that's a big dream down the road.
I love
Um,
it.
well, one thing I want to kind of because this is the picture I had in my head when I saw Cole's question. Chrissy, you were talking about how you wanted to be a professor at some point. So I
Ooh,
want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine this is you. You have a class that is dedicated to um, the topics that we have discussed in our 2 episodes here, plus obviously more because there's things that I can't even imagine that would be discussed. But the entire class is based around you have yourself and 4 TAs, and it's a maximum of 30-person class, something like that. That may even be a little too big. Let's say 20 people. And those 4 TAs are dungeon masters or game masters. And all of the students are broken up into groups, and you work through all of these topics in different systems.
yes. Oh, dude, you're speaking my language.
I think that'd be fun. I think that'd be so cool.
That'd be sweet. That would be
I mean,
phenomenal.
like the when I was a freshman in college, there was a class offered. Um, oh god, what was it? It was like a finance and banking class, like international banking and economics, but set in the Star Wars universe. So it was intergalactic economics and stuff like that, and it was like
This is
how it
very
would
good.
work. Oh, it was so
Yeah.
cool! And like ever since then, I've been like, what else could be done like
Yeah.
this? And I honestly, I think a class like that, especially if you were to just have a class that was dedicated to this side of therapy, um, I feel like something like that is going to be a thing soon,
Mhm.
but also would open up more channels to stuff like this. So
Yeah. I think that's a good point. So I would love something like that. I love the idea of continuing to just figure out how we can apply it in all sorts of different ways. I fucking love that.
yeah,
Do you want to be my TA?
I would love to be your TA.
Dream job.
um,
Dream job confirmed.
Dream job. Oh my gosh. But yes, that is all the time we have this episode of Murder and Coffee. Chrissy, thank you so much again
Seriously. Oh my
for coming
gosh.
on and sharing your boundless wisdom. Chrissy, what do you have going on either in life or in TPK or streaming or other things
Where
that you
can
would
people
like
see your
to
face and hear
talk
your
about?
words?
Yeah. So you guys can find me at ChrissyCrits all over everywhere. Um, thanks, Cole, for that hashtag. Thank you, Cole.
Yes.
So on Twitter, on Instagram, on Twitch, that's the tag you can find me at. You can find me in the TPK Discord all over the place. I'm forever in the TPK Discord, wilding out. So what do I have coming up? So coming up this week is kind of light game wise, I think, right? It's not module week, is it? No.
It sure is, my dude.
Oh shit. Okay, just okay. Then I do have things coming up. So that would be Tuesday TOA with Tony and the crew. And then Thursday, you can see me on Queen's Gambit for our Tyranny of Dragons campaign. And then Friday morning, this one's going to be wild. So Friday morning, I am DMing on stream Breakfast of Champions, where you guys are going to get to see some of your favorite childhood breakfast cereal mascots take on the world? Question mark.
Ah,
So we'll see where that goes. It's going to be super hijinksy. We have a group of, uh, well, not all of them because I know Sable's in the States, but a group of British players. So it's going to be during the day. It's not going to be in the evening. So if you need something to listen to while you're working, tune in. We will be streaming during the day. Um, yeah, that's where you'll find me, and doing therapy all over.
Awesome.
yes.
Sarah, do you want to talk about stuff you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. Hi. I know we might have some folks from our host and everything, but I am Osarix Franco. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Osarix Franco. I play in a bunch of games here on TBK, like the Harpers. Next, a week from today, we have Dark Echoes, a Curse of Strahd campaign. I'm very excited to get back to that narrative. There's a lot going on, and I'm curious. You can also find me over at Nat20 tomorrow, in fact, in the Morningstar and Company campaign. It's a post-Barovia, post-Abyss. We have confirmed we're back in Faerun campaign, where I'm playing a character who's dealing with a really a lot of heavy themes, and that's been really rewarding to do. But you can find me there for Morningstar and Company, Beyond the Tide, shows like Smash Cut. And next week we have the final episode of our Monster of the Week campaign, Roundhouse. It's an 8-person cast DM'd by or keepered by Saint, DMF Saint. Please come check it out. It's been a buck wild ride to get here, and I am so thrilled by it. And you can catch me here at TPK once a month, GMing the Bard's Refrain, which is a lot of fun. So that's me, my guys. That's me. Ty, tell the people.
Hello, I am Tyrant. You can find me everywhere at Dr. Tyrant. Tomorrow, I will be playing one of my favorite characters of all time, Lord Vader, in a very special villains Star Wars one shot. I've been excited about this for so long. It's
So
going to be a
exciting.
lot of fun. My costume is nowhere near as complex and amazing as some of the other ones, but I'm still excited. It's guys, it's gonna be good.
You mean
should see the-
Monday? You mean Monday, right? Not Sunday.
I mean Monday. I
He's so
forgot.
excited he forgot
Listen.
time.
Listen, I thought today was Sunday.
Okay.
Oh,
Fair.
good. I have a weekend left.
Please don't let it be Sunday, God.
Yeah, goodness. Yes, it's going to be incredible. On Thursday, we are going to finish up our Roundhouse campaign, and it's going to be great. I'm sure a lot of us are going to cry. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry. I have a feeling one of my characters is gonna die on Thursday.
Nah, everybody lives.
Uh,
Nora died, so all might live. Never again.
Well, I don't know. And then Saturday, the return of Dark Echoes, where I play my character that has already died and come back to life. My first character that's ever died. Winchester, the druid, the blind druid, as we navigate through the highlands of Barovia and possibly through some scary, spooky stuff this coming up episode. Who knows? We'll see. And it was talked about a little bit yesterday, and I'm not going to share too many secrets, but I will be GMing a Monster of the Week one shot in April 16th, called Rutro. It is a Scooby Doo one shot, and I am very, 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 very excited to run this. The cast has been announced, and Chrissy is part of this cast. The characters have not been announced yet. We are doing something special for the character announcements, so keep your eye on the Discord, which is linked in chat, and
Ty.
on TPK's Twitter. Yes.
Ty, you reminded me.
Yes.
I have a secret project of my own that I was supposed to talk about as part of my sign off. I am GMing a one shot, you guys, which is wild because I normally only do the Bard's Refrain. And it's going to be April 20, let me confirm, 5th. We'll have a teaser out on TBK's Twitter, so check that out. But if I'm going to give a hint, and I do really want to give a hint, I would just remind everybody to live their lives a quarter mile at a time.
Oh my god.
So good. Fuck.
So keep an eye on the Twitter, fam.
So good. I cannot wait.
Well,
oh my god, that's such a good line.
That is the end of our scheduled content. Thank you all so much for coming out.
Awesome. And until next time, keep your coffee hot.
And your murders cold. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.